Westfield gives up San Francisco Mall, signaling more pain ahead. Retailers have been fleeing the city's downtown, and some analysts say there may be more to come. It's an issue facing various downtowns around the United States. I love how they try and, once again, obfuscate what's going on. It's affecting everyone. Yeah, no, the Hilton and Park 55, massive hotels in center San Francisco, being surrendered to lenders, and a massive mall, which is several 100,000 square feet being surrendered, is particularly unique to San Francisco. Maybe it's all of the human feces littered about the streets or the rampant open air drug use, but this city has been gutted and destroyed. And the question to ask is, should we be happy or sad about this? Should we gloat? Haha, look what your policies have wrought. Why? Even though these policies are destroying these cities, you still have these liberals cheering for it. So maybe we just say, well, okay, then you're getting what you want, I suppose.
They are. I still think there's reason to be sad about it because this is something that is being destroyed by people who didn't build it. And that's always very important to remember. This city was built up by their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, and then they came along and they tore it down. And part of the reason they tore it down was out of envy. There are people who have worked harder than me, who have made more beautiful things than I've made or could even hope to make or am interested in making. And that makes me mad, and I want to rip it all apart. And so when they start to do that by implementing insane policies that say things like, you can steal and we won't prosecute you as long as it's less than $900 worth of theft that's occurred, and you rewire people's thinking into this very insane short-term paradigm that rewards people for taking and not for making, then this is the exact scenario you end up with. You get destruction and nobody builds anything. Why would they? You've only punished them for it.
Can we go back to when they passed that law in San Francisco where they were like, or I don't know if it was a law or a policy or whatever, anything under $990 or whatever, you would not be criminally charged if you stole. And then we immediately started seeing videos of people filling garbage bags full of merchandise. Well, I guess because none of those items equal up to $1,000. So they would just start dumping entire shelves into bags, hop on their bike, and then ride out, and everyone just shrugs.
Why wouldn't these people keep doing this?
There's no incentive.
We're telling them
if they get arrested, they get let out a couple hours later, and they can go right back, and they do this 20 times.
And then
we have these employees at Lululemon who reported on or tried to stop the...
They just filmed it.
They just filmed it.
Yeah.
And they got fired just for filming because the policies don't intervene.
They went outside, like followed them filming or something like that.
Well, right. I've mentioned this 100 times in the show, but anytime someone's doing something degenerate, immoral, or destructive, we have to engage in every level of socioeconomic analysis to excuse their behavior. They were only stealing from that store because we didn't spend enough public money on the library in their neighborhood, or they didn't have a good enough public school. But then when these people film someone who's stealing something from their store, which is an abundantly reasonable reaction to people committing an act of theft in front of you, they're evil. They have to be fired. There's no mercy. We don't engage in any kind of analysis of their behavior. We just dispense with them.
You look at AOC cheering or demanding the criminal the charges for Penny, saying that it was murder. So a murder happened in public. How is he not getting it's wild. They're creating the problem. They're exacerbating the crime, and then they're trying to imprison and destroy the lives of anybody who tries to protect themselves. They genuinely don't want you living in these cities.
And where does this all come from? We have communism being rebranded in Western culture.
Yeah.
A lot of this stems back to Karl Marx. It's the same policies. It's the theory that there is class warfare, there's an oppressor class, and there are the oppressed. And a lot of people, when you're talking about this with normal people, it's not probably good to talk about communism because they look at you sideways like you have a hole in your head and you're some conspiracy theorist. But Marxism has been rebranded to be equity. And up in Canada, where I'm from, we even have the conservative leaders calling for an equitable society. Well, equity is just equality of outcome. That's not what we want. We want equality of opportunity. If Martin Luther King were alive today, they'd be calling him the black face of white supremacy, just as they did with Larry Elder in California, because he was calling for equality of opportunity. But he would be aghast at what's happening today. I
mean, but we're also talking about the civil rights era back in the 50s and stuff. So he's fairly conservative on a lot of issues. And I don't know what his religious background was. Obviously, he
Martin
was
Luther King.
Yeah, obviously he's Christian, but I don't know which sect specifically.
I believe he was Baptist.
Baptist.
Yeah.
I mean, just that alone makes him a fascist.
Right, a Christo-fascist.
Right.
If you're a Christian today, you're a Christo-fascist. I get called it all the time. People assume I'm a Christian. I'm not. I'm basically agnostic. But I deal with these crazy people all the time, these violent people. I've been arrested twice after getting assaulted, just because it's easier to get rid of me than it is to get rid of all the crazy people.
I've been saying that. We had a Press for Truth. Dan Dix was at a protest. Do you know the story?
That's me that he was filming.
Oh, he was filming you. And then they pulled him out.
I'm the guy that got assaulted.
And then they removed him. They said, you got to get out of here. And they pulled him out and threatened him with arrest.
That's happened to him as well.
Right. He was assaulted.
I'm confused because he was recently just interviewing me when I was assaulted.
And then they threatened you with arrest or did arrest you?
No, the main police officer who was there to investigate a previous assault that I already incurred smiled as I was getting assaulted.
Wow.
And this video had 80 million views. It went all around the world.
Wow. Dan was...
This was just a couple months ago, but I've also been arrested after getting assaulted twice in Vancouver.
Dan was filming a protest. They attacked him. The police then come in and they say, you have to leave. And he's like, me? He's like, they attacked me. And he's like, don't care. You get out now or you're going to be arrested.
It happened. It happens.
I've been telling people.
It happens to street preachers as well in Canada.
The police are going... Well, look at that preacher in Reading, Pennsylvania. Do you see this story?
No.
There was a pride event happening and a guy was in the street and he started to quote a Bible verse and the cop just grabs him and arrests him.
Oh, I did see that.
Because the cops are thinking it is easier to arrest one person than deal with a riot.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's good. It's
Back
great
to
when
blue,
they do
baby.
that because this backfires. Backfires every time. I got charged with causing a disturbance after getting assaulted by a union rep, actually, of the British Columbia government. And I was hoping it would go to trial because this would have been a slam dunk victory. But of course, one day before my court hearing, the charge gets dismissed. In the meantime, I was banned from walking on all these streets in the middle of downtown Vancouver. But all it does is bring in more support for the cause. So it backfires every time. And we have to expose this every time, but we have to also take it and use it in our favor, as we have been doing, and it's working. People are waking up finally to what's going on in Western culture.
Yeah. You just worry, though. And I think there's kind of an intellectual and governmental arms race occurring, which is the left is trying to become as powerful as possible and get as much leverage over the average person before people wake up to what's happening, right? Ideally for them, everyone hasn't woken up to what they're doing and what they're trying to do until it's already too late and they have all of the power. So we have to get as many people as possible informed before we get to the point where they're literally able to do whatever they want. And it's getting close. It really is getting very close.
And my biggest concern for all of this is the universities, because that's where these kids are really getting indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of them have leftist parents or whatever, but they get into these universities and these are indoctrination stations now.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's TikTok.
I think it's
that
both.
for sure.
Yeah, it's in high schools too.
Especially for the younger kids.
I think kids are starting to push back, but I think, I've had this debate with Dr. Peter Boghossian, who shares a similar view to yours, that this stuff originates in universities. And I think a component of it does, but I think social media algorithms have perpetuated this. And the reason why we're seeing so many companies now backtrack and panic, even everyone's saying, oh, ESG is driving this stuff. And I'm like, I don't think so. I think this stuff is driving ESG, or there's some correlation, but not a direct causation. Right. Target saying they wanted to hide their Pride merchandise in some stores. The bottom line is everything. And if their cost benefit analysis is we make money when we do Pride stuff, they'll keep doing it. Now that the Bud Light thing happened, they're starting to say, we actually are going to lose a lot of money if we do this. So just stop doing it. What's the point? So I think that's actually a very promising sign. I do think there's something turning around here, and I think we are on a major path towards victory.
Yeah. I've
been hearing some crazy stuff, like people who are completely outside of politics posting things on YouTube and stuff and saying like, hey, man, I'm not cool with this.
That's me.
Well, no,
that was me. Yeah. But
what is you?
I used to be in the investment arena. I used to have a real job before I was a crazy billboard person standing out on the street getting assaulted and arrested. But
crazy billboard.
It amazed me that Wall Street essentially was captured by communism, because that's as capitalist as you get. Yet we have ESG coming through the back door, and you mentioned ESG. And why is ESG capturing Wall Street? Well, ultimately, that even comes down to communism, because you have firms like BlackRock managing this $30 billion pension fund or whatever it is in California. And you get the leftist politicians pressuring BlackRock that if you don't start pushing our agenda, we're not going to let you manage our gigantic pension fund. So ultimately, they bow down to some of these pressures, and they start, in turn, putting these pressures on the companies that they invest in. Otherwise, they won't invest in them. And when it comes to investing, it's all about the institutional investors that these corporations care about. They don't care about the retail investor. It's all about the institutions. And so kind of through this back door, they've gotten in there. But all of this is coming from so many directions. It's the WEF, it's the WHO, it's the UN,
right.
It's everything.
Well, I mean, the activist organizations exist, but what I see happening is when it was about what's socially acceptable and what's not. Before the internet, racism is not socially acceptable. Like most bigotry, hate speech, all that stuff, people are like, hey, we don't want to do that because it can cost us money. If I'm selling donuts in my donut shop, The last thing we want is for someone to feel unwelcome to stop buying from us. That simple component, along with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which enshrined civil rights, created algorithmic pressures. You end up with social media running two different worlds right away. One was nationalistic, one was progressive. The progressive one seemed to be more socially acceptable because it was in line with movies and Hollywood and things like that. The nationalistic one seemed to be conservative, so it's no good. So what do? Facebook almost immediately starts having conservative stories pulled from their trending news tab. That was the big breaking revelation from Gizmodo. Then they start from like 2007, 2008, start actively promoting as much as possible things that were socially acceptable. So companies started mass producing articles that just played the social justice game because that's what was getting promoted and that's what made them money. So if you've got a kid who's 9 years old in 2009 and they just get on Facebook for the first time, even though that's you're supposed to be 13, but let's say their parent got them a cell phone and they find a way to get on it. All they see every day are videos of black people being beaten by police. Why? Because it made money for corporations. That's the only reason. Media websites made money off of it. That kid, 9 years old, it's the only thing he sees. Now he's 23. His whole world growing up, the only thing he ever saw was these kinds of videos. Then you end up with that video where it was Nuance Bro. I don't know if you saw this one. Nuance Bro was having a Twitter space with this Gen Z for Change guy. And the Gen Z for Change guy said 30% of black people are killed each year. Like, just
by the police, specifically.
A number so insane. Nuance Bro is like, that means all black people would be dead in 3 years or so. Are you nuts? And then the kid goes, would you agree that 15 to 20% is more fair? And then they're just dying laughing like, have you lost your mind? No, they never had it. That's why, long story short, I think it's the algorithms that are manipulating these kids into believing this fictitious version of the world. And then you end up with a lot of people saying they're delusional or they're crazy. And I'm like, no. There's a difference. Someone may be suffering a disability, an ailment, developmental disability, is absolutely different from a kid growing up and being lied to their whole life.
Yes. The problem with society today, so we think we're this advanced society. I said this on a video the other day that took off a little bit when talking about the transition of kids. We think we're this advanced society, technologically and all that we are. Yet psychologically, we're the same as cavemen used to be. Our minds are very malleable. We're prone to groupthink. We're prone to mass psychoses. And now you bring in social media and these algorithms, and it's so easy to manipulate vast swaths of the population. And that is what's happening. And you say this isn't necessarily coming from the universities, but all these people working at these social media companies, a lot of them became radicalized and got pushed further left while they were going to university, and then they get these jobs.
Facebook was built at a university by Mark Zuckerberg while he was at the university.
But why is it, pre-2016, Twitter is the free speech wing of the free speech party, and then all of a sudden it starts to change? That, I think, may have been the result of the election of Donald Trump. You see that video where Google executives are crying, saying, I can't believe we let this happen, and things like that. Why is it that in the early days of these websites, these media companies that were getting traction, the one I often cite is Mike.com, which is, woke progressive. When it started, it was Ron Paul libertarian because it wasn't. And these are the same people who went to university, who started these companies at the time, held very different views. Right. And then it changed. I think the reason is, over a long enough period of time, if the pressure is on conservative view bad, liberal view good, then you end up with hyperpolarization towards the liberal and the banning of conservative ideas. I don't think it has anything to do with universities. Universities theoretically should take generations to indoctrinate a society. You're there for a few years, you come out, and then you're dumped right back into society. Spending a few years in an indoctrination center, you come out, you have those ideas, you try to then apply that pressure to the rest of the country, which is millions, hundreds of millions of people. You will hold those views, but it's not going to be as pronounced because you can only go so far. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.